you're familiar with Ajinomoto.
Of course, yeah.
Ajinomoto itself is pretty interesting because of their expertise in terms of, I mean, I won't even pretend to understand what goes into it, but because of the expertise in terms of, I assume it's to do with chemistry, fabrication of all these things, they're actually pretty good at creating components for, say, semiconductors. So I'm not talking about like really hard stuff, but it's just a small piece that goes into a semiconductor or semiconductor machine, and the revenue from that is actually pretty good because you're talking about profit margins in double digits, mid double digits.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a lot more than seasoning because I mean, for seasoning you're talking about easily, you wouldn't even have to really look into it, single digits.
Yes.
If we were to take a leap and say you're running the company, right? Where would you invest more of your time and money in? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And let's say you look at the outlook for trade policy now. If someone wants to put tariffs on you, for instance, let's say someone wants to put some sort of trade policy, trade action against Japan, right? It's much easier to target something like the end product, like seasoning from this company, this brand, this class of thing.
Interesting.
Rather than a small component in that sense. So I think a lot of these Japanese companies, they do know that. They've been branching into these things for decades. At least past 2 decades, a lot of heavy investment in it. They've cemented themselves in these supply chains, and there's a lot of these value stories, if I were to use that term, within Japanese stocks. And I think, somebody who's out there looking for these kinds of stories could probably find themselves a bargain or two. End of the day, it's a team game. And what I mean by that is, let's say one side imposes penalties on another, they're not going to just sit there and take it. They're going to look for how to fix it. They're trying to make friends or better friends with the leadership in Beijing.
Yeah.
Right? And that has been quite obvious. I mean, they're not doing it so outright that it would provoke a reaction from their other allies, but they're not closing the door there. So that's one perspective of looking at it. And I think that shows the kind of, to me at least, that shows the kind of thinking they're taking towards, say, a more uncertain environment, which is, let's open more doors. You see them coming down to this part of the world more as well, in terms of investment, in terms of thinking about shifting supply chains here, in terms of securing more raw materials for their factories. So certainly, I think they're going to be pretty resilient to it. The calculus is the same for whoever's running whichever economy. If there's uncertainty here, you're not going to fixate on that and come up with, say, 100 scenarios. If he does that, then we opt for that. Sure, but you're also going to look at alternate scenarios, deepen your trade relations with other countries especially. So another example I could tell you perhaps is that now you're seeing an interesting, I wouldn't call it a U-turn, but warming of ties between Europe and China because of what you're seeing in the current environment with the US, right? Which would have been, I think, not really on people's radars about, say, a year back or two years back.
Yeah.
So that's interesting because right now I think everybody's out there looking for who can buy the most of my product.
Yeah.
And right after the
it's
US,
a very practical need.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So right after the US, then you have Europe. And Europe has a real need for affordable products of all kinds, consumer goods to military applications. And some of the best ones in the world to provide those are in Asia. One of them is Japan. So, in terms of where things are going in international relations, I do see Japan doing pretty well under this current leadership.
So you talked about having a strategic mindset, having more allies on the table, which will serve you well in these uncertain times. So how does the weak yen impact Japan's economy, trade, and inflation outlook?
It's a simple relationship in the sense, I think everybody understands this. The weaker the yen, the better the exporters do. And Japan is export heavy, right? So that one's a pretty simple concept. But I think the key question there is, how does that affect your stock prices?
Yeah.
Because stocks are forward looking. So everybody kind of has a view on where the yen is going. If it's coming down from a 30-year low, the fundamentals that send the yen to the 30-year low, now they're unwinding. Therefore, you don't expect it to be at a 30-year low, they're going to unwind. That means it's bad for stocks, and therefore stocks should go down. That's been reflected in the Nikkei a little bit at the beginning of the year, but there's also other factors at play. But what I can say is that the whole reason why, or not the whole reason, at least part of the reason why the yen is unwinding that, or rather is rebounding, is because the outlook for the economy is a lot better. I look at Japan as an investment case. I think that Bank of Japan policy is positive for stocks. I think economic trajectory is positive for stocks. I think the stock themselves, in terms of what they are doing for corporate governance, is positive for stocks. And therefore, I think it's solid, cast iron, bulletproof case for investment, because right across the sea, all of a sudden DeepSeek happened, and the kind of euphoria, and I would use the word deliberately,
Yes,
the kind of euphoria
is the right word.
the kind of euphoria you see from AI,
Yeah.
it just shifted from the US just to China, right? One interesting thing to me there is, the investment case for Japanese stocks hasn't really shifted all that much. So I think it's just a matter of staying the course.